joy of this convention is a very rich experience in our lives, and I'm so grateful to be a part of sharing in it. Some various times have been a privilege. This year is particularly a joy because I have a daughter here on campus at Ozark, and I got to tell you, it's a real special thing for a dad when he has a chance to see the environment where his children are engaged. And I'm grateful. I am grateful as a parent. I'm grateful as a preacher. We also have two other students from our church back home here, two young men, and they were great men when they came, but they are becoming better men because of their involvement here at Ozark Christian College, and thank you for that. Matt, thank you for what you're leading here. As a parent, that's a wonderful thing to enjoy. You have a rather aggressive theme for this particular conference, thrive. I don't think I've ever heard that word used in relationship to the life of a man named Job. I like it. I just don't think we do it very well. Let me pose some questions. When you are seated in a movie theater, which armrest is yours? All you who are sitting up there in the renegade section, when you sat down, which armrest did you claim? The right, the left, or did you hog them both? Did you? Huh? I have a question. When a medical team administers a lethal injection to a death row inmate, are they required to use a sterilized needle? Are they worried about infection? I have a question. If you were to dig a tunnel through the earth from one side to the other, all the way through, and if you were to jump in the hole, how would gravity influence your fall? Would you fall all the way through to the other side, or would gravity influence you from the other end and you'd be hanging suspended? Now, all you science guys are saying, no, you'd be burned up in the molten resource there. Work with me a little bit here. I'm wondering about the gravitational influence here. What would happen? I have a question. If women who are, we'll call it well endowed, are invited to work at Hooters, is a woman with one leg recruited to work at IHOP? I got some images going on in my mind here. I'm having a hard time. I have a question. Do butterflies remember life as a caterpillar? Ever wonder why the sun lightens our hair and darkens our skin? Ever wonder why women cannot put on mascara unless they have their mouth open? Why is lemon juice that you use for cooking made with artificial flavor, and dishwashing liquid which you use to clean up made with real lemons? Why is the time of the day with the slowest traffic called rush hour? Why didn't Noah just swat those two lousy mosquitoes? I have some questions. A million questions on 1,000 topics with but a handful of answers in sight. Welcome to life on planet Earth. More questions than answers, more problems than solutions, more mystery than resolve. I remember as a young pastor sitting on the edge of a hospital bed staring into the face of a woman who was losing her hair to chemotherapy. In those dimensions of her experiences, she was posing questions. She heard the ever-intensifying sound of a death clock that was winding tighter and louder with every tick, tick, tick. So she uttered questions, bold questions, that made the wisdom volumes of the universe look like nothing more than mercy rhymes. Wisdom volumes can express things like principles and ideologies, philosophies and calculations, but somehow they offer no more comfort than Little Henny Penny or the Gingerbread Man. In moments like those, you swallow your arrogance as a minister and you wonder why in the world you ever gave anyone the impression that you, pastor, could somehow speak on behalf of God. have some questions. 1,000,000 questions and 1,000 topics with but a handful of answers in sight. More questions than answers, more problems than solutions, more mystery than resolve. Welcome to life on planet Earth. During these few days, we are mining the wealth of the Old Testament, peering into ancient lives whose cries turn out to be quite contemporary. And there is a name synonymous with human suffering through the ages. His name, Job. I bet he wished he was famous for anything else. And strangely, his name still resonates on Main Street. The title given this address by the convention planners is Suffer Patiently. Suffer patiently. I'm not so sure. I want you to hear from Job's story in the middle. You know what happened at first. You know the ending. Old Proctor made sure of that last night. He took all my thunder in preaching on Job here. He was supposed to preach on Proverbs. Do you understand that in the program here? I guess when you're the president, you can do just anything you want to do. You know what happened at first. You know the ending. It's the middle. I want you to see the middle. You see, the middle turns out to be the toughest portion. The middle is a place where the awful stuff has already happened, but the resolve has not yet come. The middle of the story, 42 chapters in the book of Job, chapter 21, right smack dab in the middle, and he's got some questions. Verse 4 says, "Is my complaint directed to man? Why should I not be impatient? Look at me and be astonished. Clap your hand over your mouth. When I think about this, I'm terrified. Trembling seizes my body." There is a paramount question burdening him as he tries to recover from what has happened. Verse 7, "Why do the wicked live on?" Now that's a fair question for any father who has buried 10 noble children all in the same day. 10, think of it. Now, I've had some weird things to shepherd over the years. A father and a son dying in the same night, one to cancer, another to hemorrhage, 2 memorials on the same day. That was a hard day. A few months ago, another very odd funeral. Husband and wife, both taken by cancer. Hers kidney, his brain. He died on Friday. She died on Monday. One service memorialized them both. I've seen some weird things, but Job is so far beyond. 10 noble children surrounded by flowers, and walking away, he asked this question, why? Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? They see their children established around them. Their offspring are in front of them to be viewed. Their homes are safe, free from fear. Not like Job's homes where the pillars collapse in a windstorm. Their homes are free from fear. The rod of God is not upon them. Their bulls never fail to breed. Their cows calve and do not miscarry. They send forth their children as a flock. Their little ones dance about. They sing to the music of the tambourine and the harp. They make merry to the sound of the flute. They spend their years in prosperity. They go down to the grave in peace. And yet they're the kind of people that say to God, "Leave us alone. We have no desire to know your ways." Yet how often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? How often does calamity come upon them, the fate God allots in his anger? How often are they like straw before the wind, like chaff swept away in the gale? Notice all the question marks in the text. More questions than answers, more problems than solutions, more mystery than resolve, more ambiguity than clarity, more obscurity than revelation, more riddles than replies. Welcome to life on planet Earth. Job. He's an ancient classic. He's struggling with a very contemporary problem, and he wants to ask God. Verse 4, the problem is he has pain, many life pains, and yet the wicked don't seem to encounter them. It sure is a mystery. It's one of the questions that causes this man to be stuck. You minister among people every week who are stuck. Life has caused them to be stuck. Mistakes, surprises, unfairness, victimization. Lots of things cause people to be stuck. Some people came to this convention stuck. Ceiling narrowing down, options dwindling, walls collapsing, fences way too high, stuck. You never noticed, or maybe you have. Maybe you have noticed someone who's stuck. I was driving a local highway some time ago, and off to the right, about 50 feet back from the edge of the pavement on an ascending part of the ditch, there was a wreath. A stake was sticking out of the ground about 2 feet, and on it hung this wreath. It looked like it'd been there for a while. Colored ribbon on the bottom was sun-faded. Flowers adorning the evergreen circle were wilted. Actually, they were dried. The wreath, there's a story behind that wreath, and part of it is visible. And behind that wreath, there are things you could have witnessed. Screeching tires and crunching metal, noises of collision, broken glass, grinding gravel. There was impact and implosion. Perhaps there was even time for a scream. Then there was blunt force trauma that took a simple, unsuspecting life to black. All that could have been seen. It was visible. Had you been standing roadside, you could have been one of the witnesses. The wreath, it tells some story of the visible things. But that wreath was put in its place because someone out there was dealing with invisible things. See, that's why the wreath is on the side of the road, because someone out there is trying to recover. And that's the hardest part. The hardest thing is recovery. That's why in the book of Job, it took less than 2 chapters to describe the scene of the accident and 40 chapters to talk about what a man has to do trying to get himself back together. The wreath. It took 6 seconds for the accident to play out. That's the visible portion of the wound. It takes so much longer for the invisible facets to unfold. The mystery. Oh, the mystery. The wreath. One day someone drove out to that spot, parked a car on the side of the road where skid marks are still fresh. Before he left home, he'd gone out in the garage and sorted through some miscellaneous pieces of lumber lying out behind his workbench. He didn't find anything he quite wanted to use, not the right size. So he got in his car and he drove down to Menards. He bought a brand new piece, brought it home, laid it out on the table saw. He's cutting some angles to bring the end to a point. He's expecting to pound this post into the ground. He's thoroughly preparing and premeditating his actions. He sawed the lumber, and then he drove out to the spot, pulled off on the side of the shoulder, cars and semis whizzing by, appearing to intrude on what should be a sacred moment. They just drive on by. I mean, can you believe it? I mean, they just drive on by like nothing ever happened. Don't they know? Don't they know? They ought to know. He gets out of his car and he opens up the trunk and he reaches in for a hunk of wood and the mallet he brought with him from his workbench back home. And with a wreath in one hand and the mallet and the post in the other, he walks out into the ditch to choose a spot. He's thinking about it a little bit. He's not hidden behind a bush someplace or a patch of weeds for sure. It's got to be visible. He meanders for a minute or two and then he decides. He lays down the wreath and he positions the post with the pointy end down and he begins to use his mallet to drive in a couple of strikes to get it started. And once it sort of grabs hold, he begins to use both hands to bring the mallet down. Ground kind of hard, not much rain lately. It's going to require some grunting to convince that post to take its place. He's starting to hit it harder and harder and again and again. And right there, something catches him off guard. While he's pounding into stiff, resistant ground, he encounters this moment. It's an angry moment. He's pounding harder, his gritting teeth, his face is clenching. He's swinging that mallet with a double-handed descent, and he sort of loses himself, and then he sort of catches himself. He gives it one last, everything he's got sort of wallop before he stops. And he's standing there out of breath and huffing and puffing. His eyes are dripping some. He's not totally sure why he's so angry at this stupid post or why it strangely feels beneficial to strike it so hard. Like I said, it's an odd moment. He drops the mallet to the ground and he picks up the wreath and he hangs it where it needs to be. And once it's fixed, he decides to sit. Didn't bring a lawn chair. He's not searching for a shady spot. He just decides to sit right there in the long grass next to his wreath. He stares out over the ditch toward the road. The lane lines and the yellow stripes of the highway are being continually disturbed by traffic in both directions. He sits there next to his wreath, half hidden in a tall grass, tears dribbling out from under his eyelids every now and then. For some reason, he wants to stare at the highway right here at this particular spot. By now, when you read through the book of Job in chapter 21, you know exactly what that man is doing. He's wrestling with the mystery. It is the invisible mystery that has to be solved on our way to recovery. Lots of things on his mind. Here's one. All these cars going by, and they just roll past like they don't even care. Here's another. They all seem to be going by safely. How can all these others be so successful at navigating this portion of the road? How do they make it without incident? He's thinking that kind of thing. And then something happens that really stirs up the mystery. From off to his right, he sees the oncoming approach of a charcoal gray pickup. Well, it's really primer gray mixed with some rust. It's really more of a loud muffler rattling underneath, kind of muffler that won't let you sneak up on anybody. In the front of this pickup truck, there are 3 guys, and the closer they get, you can begin to make out their forms. 3 of them in that truck. Over the roar of the muffler, you can hear the sound of some banging music. I guess they call it music. Doesn't sound like music to me. Seems more like thunder mixed with the pile driving and the bass drum. Whatever they got going on, it's playing loud. And about the time the pickup with its 3 travelers reaches where the man is sitting with his wreath, the driver, with his tattooed arm hanging out the window, tosses out a can to litter the highway. It hits the road, 2 short hops, and then it bounds up and then wiggles over in the gravel until it finally comes to rest at the edge of the grass. A beer can. These 3 guys in the primer gray pickup are having this rolling party. 2 guys for the sake of spurring him on, and a driver with a thick tongue and blurry eyes behind the wheel. And they just drive by. The primer gray pickup just maneuvers the highway without incident. Oh, and it makes him mad. Just plain mad. And on any other day, it's a good thing that the man sitting in the ditch by his wreath is too slow to run down that truck, because it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right. A million idiots out on the road, and they all seem to get to their destination. And the mystery explodes in his mind. It's like he's caught. He is stuck in a notch, one notch of the mystery. See, that's how the mystery works. It has these notches. I didn't say nachos, notches. It has these holding pens that corral you for a time. You have to work through each individual notch before you can move on. When we're reading from chapter 21 in the Journal of Job, we find him stuck in a particular notch, and it is a doozy. I just can't get past what it is to see all these renegades in their primer grade pickups throwing cans at me out the window. I'm having a hard time getting past it. I'm stuck in this notch. Here's the notch that Job is stuck in for a time. Maybe some of you have been stuck in that notch too. It's the unchallenged life of the wicked. I mean, why, he asks, can all those who have nothing to do with God appear to be let off the hook, or worse? My goodness, they seem to be blessed. Oh, they escape punishment. These godless ones often seem to go through life without any apparent discipline or punishment. None or few of the tragedies that ever happened to Job seem to happen to them. The prophet Jeremiah brought forward the same question. He must have gotten stuck in that particular notch of the mystery also. Jeremiah chapter 12 says it this way: "You are always righteous, O Lord, when I bring a case before you, and yet I would speak to you about your justice." Can you hear him? Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all the faithless live at ease? Have you ever gotten stuck in that notch? You find that from the presence of your personal pain, there is growing some vast fields of resentment. And it's resentment that heads in three directions. It's toward all those renegades in their primer gray pickups. And it's all toward all those people who haven't had to go through what you're going through at the present. And it's also toward God, who seems to be letting idiots off the hook while innocents seem to pay a higher price. Let's talk about getting out of the notch. Because know this, every Sunday morning as church gathers, people assemble, and many of them are stuck in a notch. How do people locate this mysterious thing called recovery? I mean, well, that's what the therapist calls it, recovery. The Bible has more fit phrasing. Philippians chapter 4, verse 7, it's the peace of God, transcending all understanding, to guard. Phoreo is to hold in custody, like a king holding guard over a special prisoner, or secret servicemen surrounding a president, holding tight the heart and the mind in the presence of Christ Jesus. So how do you get beyond the notch of the mystery so that I can move toward God's peace? Well, there are some very practical things that Job is going to absorb as he gets closer to the end of his journal. In order to get out of the notch, well, you first have to let God be God. Chris nailed it this afternoon as he was talking about Ecclesiastes. I guess the writer of Ecclesiastes had to learn the same principle. You have to let God be God. By chapter 42 in this journal, Job will figure out how to let God be God. That means letting God do the God-sized jobs like judging the world and assessing the hearts of men and determining who should be saved and who should go to hell. There are times we've tried to step in those roles only to notice how inadequate we are for the job. Paul writes in Romans chapter 9, he says, "But who are you, O man, to talk back to God? Oh, shall what is formed say to him who formed it, why'd you make me like this?" Does the potter have a right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for noble purposes and some for common use? Or listen to the words of the Apostle Peter. "The Lord's not slow about keeping his promises, as some understand slowness. He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance." You see, in our woundedness, we often become so self-absorbed and therefore sometimes arrogant. And since we assume that God isn't fulfilling his role like he should do, we attempt to do it for him. We judge for him, we condemn for him, we seek to punish in his place. It's our desire to execute an immediate sentence upon all we perceive to be bad. And we fail to comprehend that many times God chooses to be patient with an undeserving world because, as Peter expresses, he's actually waiting for the renegades in their primer gray pickups. He longs for all of them to come to repentance, to know him. That's why he lets them wheel on by. You see, while you're out in your ditch, sitting by your wreath, struggling through your own recovery, there is some mother out there who's been praying for her own son, the driver with the tattooed arm who just tossed his beer can at you through the window. She's been praying that God would bring her son to repentance. She's been praying that God would be patient, to give him more time, even though he doesn't seem to be making good use of his time very wisely now. She wants him to have more time before judgment. I mean, it takes some thinking and some praying, but you can get beyond the notch. But your only way to recovery is that you'll have to bring yourself to the point where you let God be God. He is able, you are not. It's fact. It's too big a job for you anyway. You'll be required to let God listen to the prayers of a mother out there and let God be patient while a man in his primer gray pickup is still being an idiot. But if you demand to be God over everyone else's life, I promise you, you will remain stuck in that notch. You will never proceed toward healing. Every day, you'll get angrier and angrier in your notch. In order to get out of the notch, I must decide to give individual men permission to engage the journey of men. See, we sort of like picturing our own lives like a journey. Such a picture leaves us room for progress, provides a little bit of wiggle room. I like thinking of my life as a journey where I have these ups and downs, the high points and some low, faithfulness that interchange with fickleness, ebb and flow. In contrast, however, I have this little aggravator in me that forbids the same journey to anyone else, and I require that everyone else around me be the finished product. That's what I'd prefer. I demand your mature result, your prime-time exposure, your ripened harvest. I want you to be ripened while I can still be a little bit green. I demand that you be complete and polished, elegant and perfect, while I expect you to be gracious while I'm still a little rough around the edges. Such an approach makes us impatient and intolerant, bigoted, judgmental, condemning, angry, constantly disappointed, readily cynical about everybody we see and all we know. You know what? Preachers, Christians can sometimes be the most cynical people on the planet. How can that be? James speaks to us. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. And here's why. Because man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. If I'm going to get past this notch, I must decide to give individual men permission to engage the journey of men. That doesn't mean I have to appreciate every journey that goes on out there or agree with every journey someone chooses. But I accept that each individual must stand and give account of their own lives before God. They must answer for themselves, and I must decide to allow them to be responsible for their own journey. I leave them in the Lord's hands because only He knows what to do with them. In order to get out of the notch, don't let the notch be any more than a notch. The notch is not the ultimate. Chapter 21 is but one chapter on the way to 42 expressions of the experience. The notch is not the whole. Feels like the whole when I'm in a notch. When I'm in a notch, it feels like this is all life is going to be from this point on. I'm never going to get past that. It's all the kind of stinking thinking that Satan wants to penetrate our minds with. He whispers in your ear, but from that stinking thinking, the Holy Spirit dares to speak. Isaiah tells the words, "Yet, O Lord, you are Father." And everybody knows they need a daddy in those difficult moments. You are Father. We're the clay. You're the potter. We're all the work. Oh, you are such a piece of work in the hand of your dad. God's still working in this. I know you're stuck for a minute or maybe a week, might be a month or 6 months. Even if you don't feel like God is working, God is working. Trust Him. He is working. He is working to unveil peace to you. He is working to surprise you. He is working to bring His sustaining grace supplied at the moments of the deepest mystery. The surprise of God's sustaining grace. The picture that you're looking at is the official 2012 poster for the football season of the Iowa State Cyclones. Now, you might not think too much of that team down here in Missouri, and you all might assume that that's a W on your schedule when you go rolling into Iowa City. But I'd like you to know that there is a winning story behind this poster. You'll see that it's signed, autographed by the players and coaches. This poster was a gift to two boys, one 16, the other 12. There's a young man in our church back home, and he plays in the offensive line for the Cyclones. He's big as a mountain, and his heart is as large as his frame. He was the one who secured the posters. It was his idea to give it as a gift. He had the players sign it, put their names on it. He was the one who gave it to the boys, Isaac, 16, and Luke, 12. Now, that football player didn't really understand what he was doing at the time, but those two boys were actually at the game displayed in the picture. The shot was taken after the Cyclones surprisingly defeated Oklahoma State in the previous season, knocking them down in their national rankings. The crowd stormed the field to celebrate. 60,000 fanatics running yard markers, sucking in the victory. The boys were there. They were there with their dad, Jeff. Well, this is Jeff and his wife, Chris, and their two sons, Isaac and Luke. They were all at the game. I suppose the reason the game is so special in their minds is not just because the Cyclones won. Cool victory. It was memorable because the next week after that game, Jeff, the father, began a medical journey into an extremely, and when I say extremely rare, I mean greater than 1 in a million, an extremely rare disease that took his life last June. He was 50. And he was just the greatest guy. Man of God, twice the man, 3 times, 4 times the man I am. It was awful. Long treatments, much prayer, fasting, and spiritual fervor invested, crying out to God on Jeff's behalf. But on one day when his body was so depleted, he developed a rampant infection that went straight to his heart, and he was gone. Did I mention that it was awful? He died last June. In October, 4 months after the funeral, I asked his wife, Chris, if she'd be willing to talk about what God is doing in her life during these long days. And to my surprise, she agreed. And so she talked before our church, and she showed this poster. She talked about the strange yet marvelous ways that God administers His sustaining grace to us at our times of need, how He is faithful to us, uphold us in such surprising ways. She used the poster to illustrate. She told us about the nice young man from our church who gave the poster to her sons and how much of a rich encouragement it was to those boys who were so missing their father. Their dad was an Iowa State graduate. It was a family trek every year to go to a game together in that honor. She talked about that particular game captured on the poster. How it was their last rich family event before the chaos began. She talked about how cool it was to have the signatures from the players and the coaches, how much that meant to her sons. And then she said, but there's more. Once the boys received the posters, they stared at it a lot. They were looking at the signatures, trying to match them up with numbers on the team, and they even got a hold of a magnifying glass, just curious if they could make out any figures in the crowd. They scoured the poster for a time, and then as Chris explained it, she said, near the middle there was a small break in the crowd, and then she said, there was my man. Through some tears, she explained, you can't imagine, but for some reason, seeing him in that picture was such a refreshment to my soul. She said, do you realize how many pieces had to come together in order for God to provide this nourishment to my spirit? Our family being at that one game that year. Iowa State winning so the fans could storm the field. The photographer capturing the shot at that particular moment. The ISU athletic department selecting that photo to represent the 2012 season. A player from our church being on the team. That player having empathy for my sons. Him going ahead and getting the signature from all the teammates, wanting to give the boys this poster. Our boys staring at it for a time with a magnifying glass out of curiosity. The crowd parting just in that spot to reveal one familiar man with his son. On top of that, my pastor inviting me to speak to our church to share what God is doing in the aftermath of the poster discovery. Chris said, it blows my mind what God has done to sustain me in every little movement of life. Even through the most difficult times. Oh, I didn't say it wasn't hard. But God sustained you in the notch of the mystery. Through the notch of the mystery, ushering you into stunning places of peace that pass all human understanding. I love that phrase. I need that phrase. You get beyond the notch when you let God be God. When you let or release men to be responsible for their own steps. When you lean on God in the unseen things while you wait for His hand to become visible. Another family in our church was on a challenging vacation event some time back. The 5 of them, Dad, Mom, and 3 sons, the youngest about 7, were canoeing a wilderness river. The day had grown long and they were running out of steam. The situation changed rather dramatically and quickly. Skies turned from sunny to gray and then quickly to black. They were out in the open on the river and the rain and the wind hit. They beached the canoes on the sandbar and mid-river hoping for the storm to pass. They were soaked and cold and exposed to the elements when Mom looked at Dad and said, "We better pray." So the 5 of them huddled on a sandbar island. They tried to pray loud enough to be heard over the howling of the wind and the lightning. 7-year-old with a look of terror on his face. And when they said amen, they decided it was more dangerous to remain here exposed. We should keep paddling toward an outlet, they said. No idea how far it is, but they endured the punishment of the storm and the pounding and the rain, and they kept paddling. And as they related the story to me, this is the part they really wanted me to know. It was a part of their family learning, what God was teaching them. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's what it was to an outlet. Around 2 bends, and there it was, a chance to get out of the current and the wind and into shelter. They had no idea where the rescue was, felt like it would be forever from now, but it was 10 minutes. And this is what they concluded as their family learning. When you don't know where God's rescue is, keep paddling. When you don't know how far you are from safety, paddle on. You pray and you paddle. They have used that phrase through other points of their family's burdens because that family, like every family, have had some storms. And they look at one another to say this phrase, keep paddling. And they all know what that means. It's like that when you're trying to get beyond the notch. You wait on God to bring His result. He will resolve the mystery, yet it will come out at His time with His purpose, orchestrated in ways that only make you blush in embarrassment as He displays His overwhelming provision. Is there any preacher in the room who preaches to people stuck in a notch? Is there any follower of Christ who came to this convention caught in a notch of your own? Then I speak over you this blessing. May the peace of God that transcends all human understanding keep, guard, secure, captive your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Amen.